this is actually the 11th episode
Oh,
of,
cool.
yeah, so this is on the Serendipitous Side podcast. I'm Ashley,
I'm Emily.
Hi. Hello.
and we're just hoping to connect us readers with the authors that we absolutely love. And we are so pumped to have you on today. This is Kimberly King Parsons, for anybody who doesn't know. If you want to just give us like a little intro on yourself.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm Kim. I live in Portland, Oregon, originally from Texas, and then I lived in New York for 13 years. I went to graduate school there and kind of hung out there. Never went back to Texas after that. And I am the author of the short story collection Blacklight, which came out in 2019. And then We Were the Universe is my debut novel that came out in 2024. I was going to say last year, and I'm like, wow, it's already 2026. And yeah, and I write about both of these books are set in Texas, even though I spent many years of my life trying to sort of claw my way out of the small town I'm from. And yet it seems like I can't shut up about it because I keep writing about it. And I have sort of both, good feelings and mixed feelings about that place, but it's home and I kind of keep returning to it over and over. And I often write about like young women and some kids and mostly, people who are trying and failing and making mistakes as they try to make their way through this world. But yeah, so that's me.
Thank you. And if you would like to, do you want to give us a little bit of a reading? No pressure, you totally don't have to.
Sure, yeah, let's just do a real quick snippet. In the center of my novel, We Were the Universe, is a psychedelic trip. And that section is called the pink rug because it takes place on this sort of iconic pink rug that exists as a physical space, but also as a sort of mental space of bliss in the narrator's mind. And so I'm just going to read like a couple pages, like a page from that opening of that scene. And all you need to know is that our main character, our protagonist Kit, is the narrator, and she and her sister Julie and their friend Yes and their friend Big Large are all hanging out, and they are about to have a San Pedro cactus trip. And so that's where I'm going to pick up. So it's just from the beginning of that section. Like a dream, this happens in the present tense, is still happening. They tell you not to look in the mirror when you trip, so of course that's what I want to do. Big, Large, and Yes, and Julie warn against it, but I'm stubborn, and no one can tell me a thing. My logic. If I can see myself reflected clearly, I might love me. This is a totally different kind of trip than any we've ever done, a different drug altogether, not mushrooms or LSD. We're at Big Large's house, only Julie has stopped calling him Big Large and instead calls him his true name, Pablo. Anyone could look at Julie with him, the way she tilts her head and stares up at him, how she bounces on her toes when they talk, and you know right away why he's such a draw. It's not just Big Large's age or size, it's the slow way he gets out of his truck, how direct sunlight makes him sneeze. His flannel shirts and his cute beer gut and the piney smelling stuff he rubs into his mustache. His mustache, for Christ's sake. Big Large is our dad if our dad were a sweetheart, a reliable, good person. His trailer's out on a big piece of inherited land. This spot is actually pretty, with sloping hills and all sorts of weird rocks and wild succulents. It feels like Texas out here, the mythic storybook version, not so much like a dusty pit of hell. Big Large splits the bills with his mother by doing electric for the county. He drives a truck with a crane stuck to it, a big bucket stuck to the end of the crane. His job is to stand inside and use his little joysticks to lift himself up, do whatever needs to be done to Wink's power lines. Bigger than everybody, Big Large is used to seeing the world from on high already, and he likes the view. All the concealed things he gleans behind people's fences, normal yard stuff like sandboxes and dog houses and bleached out patio furniture, but also things he isn't supposed to see. An illegal fire pit, a dozen white crosses all in a row, dead pets, he hopes. An old nudist squatting, balls sagging, tending to a koi pond. That's how Big Large finds the San Pedro cactus in the first place. He lifts himself up in his plastic bucket and sees somebody's secret, a psychedelic beast growing up against the house, swollen and ancient, non-native, transplanted on purpose. And I'll just stop there.
Love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, what was your original seed of inspiration for We Were the Universe?
I was with a friend in Montana. In the book, they go to Montana for a trip. She and her best friend Pete, a heartbreak trip because Pete's been dumped by his boyfriend. And I was in Montana on a similar trip with a similar friend from my life, and we were in a place called the Boiling River, which is in the book, and it no longer exists because it was flooded, wiped out. And it took me so long to write this book that the very place I was writing about did not exist by the time the book came out, but it's just a really beautiful natural hot spring. And I was in there with my friend, and we were there for him and for his issues going on in his life. And I had a little baby at home that I was nursing, and I kept feeling some of my old stuff from my past coming up in me. And I realized that it was just getting harder and harder to bat it away because I had had sort of a not dissimilar situation in my own real life that to the one that takes place in the book, which is that the our narrator has lost her sister to various things, but has struggled with addiction in her life, and then she loses her sister. And I was dealing with some similar stuff, but when you have little babies, they really keep you from thinking about yourself at all. And so, but when I was away from my kids for this sort of first time in a really long time, a lot of this stuff started to come up for me, and I was able to sort of really quickly pull myself back from the edge. But I always like to write characters for whom moderation does not apply. And so I wanted to think of a character who really takes it to the full extent. And so I made this character. And I also had a similar experience. She meets a woman in the kids' park on the playground who becomes sort of like this strange character to her. And I met a woman like that too. And she wasn't quite as crazy as the character in the book, but she was definitely something was off about her. And so I was sort of just I often will like start the seed starts from real life and then it becomes so fully synthesized and so crafted that it almost is unrecognizable. But the impulse and the feeling for the sort of two halves of the book, the past tense plane, which is what I just read from, where they're teenagers, and the present plane with her and her daughter, those were certainly pulled from like real life feelings, but all of the circumstances are like not accurate. But yeah.
What has the reception been like? Because the psychedelic aspect, that's not really something I've come across elsewhere. Was that taken well?
Oh yeah, it's funny because I had this like really a very I've had a very charmed experience in the literary world, and I sold my short story collection, and they said, "Hey, we want you to write a novel too. Do you have one?" And I was like, "No," and my agent was like, "Oh no, we say yes. We say we can. You'll just do it. You'll just write a novel." And they said, "What would you want it to be about?" And I was like, "Well, let me just tell you about some things that I know about. I know about motherhood, I know about Texas, and I know about psychedelics." And those are the things that's my wheelhouse, you know? And so they wrote it into my contract. So from the first book, it was like, work one will be Blacklight, work two shall be a novel about Texas motherhood and psychedelics. And that's all I had to do was write that book. And they knew from the very start, and Knopf is my dream house, like dream publishing house. He published my very favorite writers for my whole life since I was a little girl reading, and they are really on board with literary fiction, and so they were here for it. And from the very beginning, in fact, I even if I had wanted to write that part out, I wouldn't have been contractually able to, I think, without doing a renegotiation. So yeah, they were all on board. And I think the thing that's always interesting to me is the friction between like the various parts of our lives. And so it's where motherhood bumps up against desire, which bumps up against, perhaps experimenting with whatever as a teenager, all those different parts of the self, how they coexist in like our full being. And so yeah, everyone always would sort of laugh because I would say it's about Texas motherhood and psychedelics. And at psychedelics, people are like, huh? And I love that because it's also just, I think it's one of those things that has always been for me to get like sort of about my personal life. It's something that I had a really positive formative experience with as a young person, very similar to what Kit has in this. And I have maintained that feeling of connection amongst myself and others in the universe, which sounds so like woo and crazy, but also it's just a thing I can return to. I can call it up at any moment, and I feel like held and safe and like I don't know what it is, connected, just really connected. And so that was a really important part to me, not because of like a let's write about drugs, man, but like a this is important. Like this is about my understanding of the world and my place in it.
And I would think that that's something a lot of people can empathize with. I empathized with that when I was reading it because I also have experimented a lot with psychedelics and also have had overall good experiences with them. But I really appreciated the aspect of it. It deepens it.
Yeah, and I would even say I have certainly had my share of not great experiences as well, like just to be fully transparent. But I think this sounds like such a the cliche of like you have the trip you're supposed to have. But I learned so much about myself from those experiences as well. And in fact, sometimes it was the very thing that I needed to understand. And I don't know, I worked through things that would have taken me years to work through in therapy. Like I could do it in a quick weekend. And this is something I have not done for like a dozen years, like longer than that. My kid, I'm like, how old are my kids? I have a 14-year-old. So this has been like, I mean, we're talking like 18 years since I've actually done any of these types of things, but
Right.
they have had lasting positive implications in my everyday life. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. So the humor is one of my favorite aspects of the story, and I was curious if that was something that you've worked to hone, what that process has been like.
Yeah, I mean, I am the kind of reader that even when there are really beautiful books, I can read just gorgeous prose. And if there's not humor, I feel like something's missing. It's not going to be the thing that sticks with me. And it's because to be funny, you have to be smart and you have to be able to shift between frames of reference and you have to be there's it requires so much on the part of the person who's receiving it, but it's a quick way to connect with a character right away. So I always want to write characters who are funny and narrators who are seeing things in a slightly tilted, interesting way. And so it's I don't think I could write something that was super self-serious even if I wanted to. I used to actually when I was younger. I had a my one of my favorite mentors at Columbia, Sam Lipsyte. I was in his office and we were talking about the piece I had submitted for workshop, and it was super self-serious. And he was like, we were talking about like bands and different stuff, and he was like, you're really funny. Like, why isn't your work funny? And I think I had to get over something with that for myself, where I thought, oh, if I want to be taken seriously, I have to write really serious stuff. And honestly, I now know that the quickest way to provide depth is to get those moments of levity. And it doesn't undo the sad parts or the serious parts. It makes them more rich. And so I'm always just modulating between those two as I am in my life. And this is also the way that I process information. Just in general, I remember, like having a really bad thing happen to me, and immediately, like the jokes started to come, which is, of course, a defense mechanism, but it's also really beautiful, and I'm so grateful for it and my life. And the people that I surround myself with are really smart and funny, and they're quick. And I think that when you write a character like this in this type of voice, she's a real keep up with me now, person, and I want to say who I am right out of the gate so that we choose our readers with every aesthetic choice we make as writers. And so I want people to know this is who she is, and she's a little bit nasty, she's a little bit dirty,
Yeah.
there are all these things, but you don't want to hide those things. You show people who you are right out of the gate so that they can close the book if they're not into it. Let's save both of us a whole lot of time, because what you then do is you find your real readers. People think sometimes I'm going to write to the general. I'm going to write in that way, and I'm going to get the most readers that way. It's absolutely the opposite. You write to your very specific experience of the world, and that's how your real readers will come to you. They'll find you.
I love that. It shines through completely because that I now that I think about it though, I don't know a single person that has been like, Kit's not for me. I don't know
Really?
anybody
Well,
that's closed the book.
don't go on Goodreads too long.
Oh God.
Goodreads will humble all of us. Yes, yeah.
So as a bi woman myself, I felt so seen with Kit being in a straight passing marriage, being married to a man. Was she always married to a man, or What made you choose that route?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lack of representation of queer, as am I, queer writers, queer characters who are in straight passing relationships, and there's like an enormous amount of us. And it's also very weird to be like, how do you assert your sexuality in a straight relationship when people would look at you and just assume that you're straight? And it's like you're no less queer because you're in a straight passing relationship, right? And I have thought about how to write characters who are still active in their minds in these different ways, and also just to write into desire in a way that I think I remember seeing an early review, which shall be nameless, but that said something about how Kit was like a porn addict, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" Because she references looking at pornography, like she's certainly someone who has an active masturbatory life, yes, but it was shocking to me because if there was a male character who was looking at porn, it would not be a porn
They would just
addiction.
be horny.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
was wild. And I felt like there's a sort of there's the same thing happens too for like if there's characters who are that you can have like a straight relationship and it's like people are fine, but suddenly when a character is harder to box in, people have trouble with it or they don't know what to think of it. And they don't like well, let's just be honest. Like a lot of people they don't like women, first of all. Then they don't like women, they don't like mothers. Queer women are very confusing to them because then they're like, okay, now you're outside of you're not catering to the male gaze anymore. Like, what are you? I don't understand where to put you. And especially, so if you have a mother with desire, especially when that desire is pointed in both or all directions, I think that people take issue with it. But I love to read characters who are doing that and characters who are also happy in their marriages. It's not that she's like in a bad marriage. He's not a beard for her. She loves her husband. The thing about being queer or bisexual is you can truly be attracted equally to many different genders. And so anyway, so I just wanted to write the character that I see in my life and also some of my friends. And it doesn't feel like an unusual perspective, but I know that in the literary world it seems to be.
Does. Yeah. So the sisters in We Were the Universe played in a band, which
Yeah.
loved the name of it. And I was curious if you ever played in a band. Did you
Yes,
ever?
I did. In fact, that's where I met my straight husband. Yeah, we were in bands together in Texas, and nothing. We weren't very good, but it was just I've always been a big, huge music person, and especially like when I think back about some of the music that's like the soundtrack in my mind to this book, it's like bands that remind me of Texas, whether it's like literally like the Butthole Surfers or like the Flaming Lips, which is, just in Oklahoma, just close by. But I think about also that sort of local music scene and how important that was to my life, especially as a young person and finding your people, especially when you are growing up queer and open-minded in a place that is pretty close-minded and pretty not that. You try to find your people really quickly, and I think music is one of the fastest ways to do that. And
Agreed.
so, and it's also like where we wanted to just be good enough to open for real bands so that we could maybe get on the list and be able
Yeah.
to pay.
Exactly.
But but yeah, like and I still think music is really important. Just I mean, I still think about it a lot, and the way that I write is often really acoustically driven. So I'm concerned with the way words sound, and I think a lot of that comes just from the background of writing song lyrics and stuff like that.
I had heard that you write sentence by sentence using consecution.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so like okay, I'll give you the big takeaway is most people are already using consecution too, like but the idea that writing sentence by sentence meaning that I don't know what I'm writing until I write it. I don't have an outline, I don't have an idea. The fastest way for me to know a project is doomed is when I have an idea about it because it won't work because then I start shoehorning things to make it fit some outline or some concept. But for me, what happens is I figure out how to tap into a voice. And that's just with one line. And it's one line that is encompassing enough about this character to where I start to get a sense of who it is and who's talking to me. And then consecution is where you're basically pulling what's profitable from one line and putting it into the next. And that might be a sound. It might be, so acoustic consecution is just pulling a sound from one line and putting it into the next. It could be actual literal like thematic consecution, meaning like on page one, if somebody cracks an egg, on page three, somebody cracks a mirror. And it's the same thing, right? It's like you're pulling things from one place and putting it in the next. And I think everyone is to some extent doing this if you're paying attention at the sentence level, but consecution becomes really great because what it says to you is you don't have to make shit up. You just have to listen to what you just said. And it requires an intense amount of focus and concentration on the language. And unfortunately, many writers are forgetting that language is what we make our sentences out of, which is what we make our characters out of, which is what we make our chapters in our novels, et cetera. So it's like the smallest unit of the thing that makes this big, beautiful, important tapestry. If you think about it, like it's like a painter not paying attention to a brush stroke somehow. They're just trying to get to that big picture, but they're never actually looking at what they're doing in the small, in the micro level. And so that's consecution. But I would say if anyone's interested in consecution, Gary L. Lutz wrote the sort of the founding essay about consecution. It's called "The Sentence is a Lonely Place." You can Google it. It's on thebeliever.com. Lutz actually delivered this talk at Columbia when I was a student, and then they turned it into
Oh, wow.
yeah, and then they turned it into this essay in The Believer. But this is also based on another mentor of mine who's Gordon Lish, who's a sort of infamous, he kind of has not the greatest reputation all the time, although I loved working with him. I learned so much. But he worked with a lot of writers like Amy Hempel, Christine Scott, Sam Lipsyte, my other mentor. And he worked with these writers at using consecution, meaning that it's almost like just very lyrical, almost poetic prose that's always looking backwards, never leaping forwards, never working with ideas, always working with sentences, and in fact, mostly working with sounds. And so that's how I write. And I never know what I'm doing. That's not to say that you don't get that first draft out. Like it's great for generating. And then you have to go back and shake shit out a little bit because what happens is it starts to feel kind of claustrophobic and elliptical. Things start to like sort of loop. And so then you go back and you say, okay, well, what am I saying? It might take me the whole first draft through to even know what the story is at all. And then one good thing about this though is that the sentences stay pretty much how I want them to. They don't change. Like a lot of people are like, oh, you write the like vomit draft and then you make the sentences nice. I can't do that because I have to get the sentence how I want it so that I know what's coming next. And so that's how I've always done it. And it's been hugely helpful for me because all I have to do is, if you think of it, it's like putting little beads on a string and just making this big weird ass necklace. And then you see the necklace and you go, oh, there's a pattern. I'm going to now make that pattern a real thing, but you have to sort of like just listen and pay attention.
Whoa. You just blew my mind. That is, holy cow. So it We Were the Universe is broken up into 6 parts. Was it always six? Was it ever more or less?
No, I mean, once again, like the thing about I think one thing I did do differently with this with the novel because this is the first time I've written a novel is I had these two tracks of basically this idea for me is that grief it makes you a time traveler because suddenly you're in your life and something triggers you and you are like that's the place where we used to eat dinner, oh that's her favorite color, whatever, something small in your present plane can then trigger you and just jerk you right back into the past. And so I wanted to play around with this, but for a while the novel was all in present tense. Like I love this idea. I think I could pull this off in a short story, but I love this idea of you have a character who's at the park and she's like, my daughter's on the play on the, in the swing. And my sister Julie is 7 years old and she has her backpack on. And I thought like you could do this because to me that is how it feels. It also feels in the same way of like encompassing a life with experiences. When someone close to you dies, they are every age they will ever be, and they're compacted. And so like a sibling at 7 is the same as a sibling on when they died. Like they're the same to you because they're both unreachable. And I wanted to play around with that. And so for a while I had these sort of two tracks and I thought of it as like an alternating like chapter 1, chapter 2 kind of thing. And then I figured out sort of the mystery of how everything is fit together, which has to do with the pink rug and with the psychedelic trip. And then I realized that it's actually not shaped, it's not linear at all because grief isn't linear and neither is life. And neither is a trip, honestly. It's not linear. It's like some weird metaphysical state. And so it's more like a fractal. And so I knew that the heart of that book, which really was kind of the first thing I wrote, was the pink rug, and that everything was spinning out from that center, and that we would come back there, at the end. But yeah, I kind of had some ideas. I think for a while I was trying to, um, when you start, you have your weird necklace, and then you're like, okay, so what's the pattern? Is it just A, B, A, B? And then to realize like it can be weirder than that. It doesn't have to be the basic. And to also remember that we're not always just writing for the mass appeal. You're writing for people who can keep up and who can follow and who are, so you don't have to spoon feed things to people. In fact, my favorite feeling as a reader is when a writer is treating me like I'm smart and like I can follow and like I can understand it, so that you start to feel chosen, so that even if you're like, I don't understand why we're in this acid trip in the middle of the book, well, you will, baby. Like by the end, by the end, it's all going to come back and it'll all connect for you. But you have to earn that trust, I think, by having a voice that's sort of charming enough if you're the person who can be charmed by it. And also, maybe that's a voice that's repellent for some people who would be like, this woman is like, she's so hypersexual or whatever they're going to say. That's great. Close the book and like end it. But for the people who are along for the ride, you're like, I don't really know what's happening yet. I'm not quite sure how this fits in with the rest, but you trust that there's a plan in place and that we will be given all the information that we need. And so, yeah, I was sort of resisting the more traditional organization for a while. I tried it for a second and then I was just like, that's not what I'm trying to do here. So yeah, it changed form slightly, but yeah, the pieces were always there kind of as they are. I just had to sort of shuffle them around.
That's so cool. It's like a trip in itself. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a trippy novel.
Yeah, yeah.
How long did it take you to write it?
It's funny because I had this story. I think sometimes as writers we tell ourselves stories about ourselves, and I used to say I'm a really slow writer because Blacklight, there was a version of it that I turned in as my graduate thesis in 2010, and that book didn't come out until 2019. So there's a long time in between of full of like I want to say revisions, but again, since I write the way I write, I wasn't changing sentences. I was like shuffling things around or adding things. But I had this story that I told myself, which was you're a slow writer. It takes you a really long time to write. But then you give me a contract and you give me a deadline, and I was able to write Universe in about 2 years, two
Wow.
concentrated years.
Yeah.
But I will say this, there was a year in between. There was almost a full year, like 9 or 10 months, that I didn't touch it in between those 2 years of actually writing. So 3 years. Because I think that every single book probably could benefit from being put in a drawer for about a year after you do that first draft. And so I wanted to get it to them faster. And in fact, I did miss my deadline, but it was pandemic times. I feel like if you're going to be a year late with something, that's the time to do it.
Sure.
But I got to this point and I remember being at a residency and trying to work on it. And I was like, I can't work on it. I need to let it live its life away from me for a while. I need to come back to it when it's rested so that I can see it again because I couldn't even see it. And then I put it away for, yeah, almost a year. And then when I went back to it, I was like, I got it. I understand it. I figured out how to do it, and I sort of moved stuff around and worked with two really brilliant editors because one of them left and went to a different place, and I was so sad when I lost him. But then I got another really great editor who had different gifts to help me with. So I had like, and my agent is amazing. I just had these really smart people helping me to shape this thing that I made. But I would say, yeah, I guess like 2 years of writing with a year pause in the middle. And I honestly think that that's going to be my MO going forward is to do a draft. Whenever the draft is done, put it away for a year. Patience is a superpower. And I work on it with my kids every day, like just having more of it. But I think putting the work aside and letting it breathe is so important. And I'm so glad I didn't rush that part.
Absolutely.
Having both a story collection and a novel out, do you feel like you're more one or the other, a novelist or a short story writer?
I mean, for years, I said the thing that lights me up the most still probably is short stories because here's why. There's no room for like baggy like workaday sentences in a short story. Everything has to be tight. There, it's compression, precision, specificity, and it's breaking your heart in 8 pages. Like that's what I'm here for. Like the idea that someone can do that in such a short scope is wild to me. And that's not to say that I don't love novels and spending a long time with a character, especially a great narrator. You're like, I want to just listen to this person talk to me forever. I'll follow her wherever she goes. I love that too. Um, but I think that I still love, I think I respect the short story maybe a little more then short stories are harder. They're harder to write, honestly. A really good short story, I would say, is harder to write because you just, there's more room for, there's places in novels that are just, they're tangents, they're little divergence, there's things that don't necessarily work. People will forgive you a lot. I think that novels are maybe graded on a little curve, perhaps. Whereas I think a short story, for a short story to really hit, it has to be all tight. And so I still really love the short story. I also just know right away, like pretty soon, I know if something is a longer project or a shorter project. And I'm working on both of those right now, so I have a longer thing. I like having a steady like a marriage in the novel, and then you like to have these hot little trysts with these short stories that you can sort of go off and spend 2 months and kind of have a real shape of it. And the thing about a novel is you might have years where you don't know what you're doing, and a short story, I think you know pretty quickly. I know what I want it to be. So yeah, I don't know. I love them both for different reasons, but there is something about a short story. I just read a really great short story by Valerie Lakin called Family Planning just last night. And I was just, when you read a really great short story, I think it just like works itself into your brain in a different way than a novel for me, for this reader. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I love them both. And of course we know that what people will tell you is, oh, the market only wants novels, but I'm here to tell you that's not the case. It wasn't the case for me. Everything came to me because of short stories. Like I wouldn't have had the novel at all if it weren't for the short stories in the first place. So it just depends.
Em and I are big proponents of short stories.
Oh, good.
That's
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
huge fans. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
good. Yeah, yeah. And it's also, it's not just to like, I teach in an MFA program, and of course, short stories are easier to workshop, and there's a lot of reasons why people start with them. But I would definitely not say that short stories are somehow like practice for the novel. In fact, I think it's, I really do think it's much harder to write a beautiful short story that really lands than it is to write a pretty good novel or a good novel. And so, yeah, I'm always sort of, uh, I'm always skeptical of people who are like, oh, yeah, the short story is what you do before you figure out how to write novels. I'm like, nope, I don't think that's it.
Not if you do it well.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Does your process differ much? Like when it comes to just day-to-day writing, does it differ depending on what form you're working on?
No, I mean, because I just do this one weird thing with consecution, I'm just like, I'm literally just picking up where I left off. So it's just the bead. It's just what's the bead now? I'm putting it on the string. I'm not even worried about the necklace. I'm just looking at that day's bead. And so I'm letting it grow. But what happens is with a short story, it starts to narrow down and narrow down and narrow down. And with a novel, it starts to open up and open up. And so I can sort of start to tell which direction I'm going, but the actual work is exactly the same. It's just listening to what's there. And then I think for the novel, it's more like, and not to write it like a bunch of short stories because that's not it either, but to try to think of it as like these sections or movements or whatever, and to think of each of them as being almost standalone, but then together there's sort of a synergy that happens where like if you pulled one piece out of this book, hopefully it would collapse, right? If you have sections of a book that you can pull out and it doesn't fall apart, then you don't need that section, right? Something's wrong. But also I like the idea of having something that is sort of all encompassing. So sometimes if I'm like right now on this novel I'm working on, it'll be a section and I can feel it coming to an end and it feels almost like a short story feeling. But then I know it's a part of a bigger piece. But the day to day is identical. It's just me moving my little syllables around.
Dang.
Super
Ugh.
cool. Yeah. So I really like the way that you write about sex and intimacy, the rawness, the authentic writing. And I was curious what the drafting process, like how do you find this balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same. Writing about sex is hard because there's so much of it is so bad. I mean, just in general, like we read it, it's bad. Like we have a, and the reason that it's bad, I think, is because people start to get scared to be specific again. And so it's like the language is borrowed language. It's like his member, it's all that like that sort of stuff, right? And what happens is it loses the specificity of intimacy with between characters because that's not it's not, no one's ever really thinking about someone's member. It's like in the moment you're thinking about that person's particular personality and the specific circumstances of the room or whatever. And I think again, it's that people think, well, sex is always the same. I'm going to write about sex and it's going to make sense to a bunch of different people. And it's like, no, it actually has to be about sex between those two characters. And so it's also picking a lens. Like I think a lot of bad sex writing doesn't choose a perspective. And so almost it's like you could be writing something that's in a close first person, and then in those sex moments it becomes this weird like neutral outside thing, and you're like, no, this character, the way this character views the world is weird and tilted, and so she's going to view sex in the same way, and she's going to have the same thoughts in her head. And if you have a character who can't quiet her mind, she's going to still have that when she's having sex. It's going to be the same. But also I think not being afraid to write into desire in general, because it's a huge part of being alive. And I think people get afraid of writing. I don't know why. I mean, I guess probably it's just to be, I want to think about women writers, because you think about Philip Roth or some of these other men writers who have no problem at all being like
Right.
really crass even in writing the way that they write about sex. I think that sometimes it's just like good girl stuff, like
Yeah.
we have to be good girls, and good girls don't talk about that. So getting over that, and then but then also just, yeah, letting your characters like obsessions and infatuations lead you to the kind of sex that they have. I think writing about sex is a lot like writing about dreams, because it's wild. Some of these things are like almost unfathomable. Like you're like literally entering a person. Like it's like something that, like, we have real life, and then we have the sex act, which is so strange. Actually, it's like a very strange, it's actually like drugs too. I feel like there's sort of drug experience, dream experience, and sex experience are all on the same plane that's outside of real life. It's like deeper than real life, right? And I'm always trying to get to what's below the everyday. But I think the way to do it is to just, yeah, to think of everything as being synthesized through perspective.
I love that it was kept largely interior too. It wasn't like
Yeah.
she wasn't really acting on anything. Was that
Yeah.
always the route that you wanted to take?
Yeah, for sure. Because I think she's not a bad person. Like she's not trying to like do, it's like also the idea that like you can have this like really rich, vivid interior fantasy life that is wholly satisfying. That's almost more satisfying in some ways. You know what I mean? It's like almost, so she gets that satisfaction just from her thoughts, and she doesn't have to act on any of those things. She's still a great mother. She's still a great wife. I mean, I guess she's struggling, right? And so she's going through some stuff right now, but I would argue that she's still very much, even though her mind can't be fully attentive to her daughter, she's very much showing up, and she's trying to end the cycle of stuff that happened in her own family. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of that is at play. Yeah, for sure.
I loved it because she did stay present
Yeah.
even when she wasn't fully like it. Yeah,
Well,
I
which
loved
is
that balance.
Which is also something that I think, people don't talk a lot about, how motherhood can be kind of boring. Like some parts of it can be the same way that it's like when you're with your dog in the dog park or whatever, and you're like, I have to talk to these people because we have dogs, and like now we have this thing in common because we just have dogs together or whatever. Or you're like, I'm here for the enrichment of my child, or I'm here for the enrichment of my animal, but I don't necessarily need to be like, my body is here, but can't my mind be somewhere cooler than this moment? Like I think that
Yeah.
happens all the time.
Oh yeah, at playgrounds wanting a sign that's like I'm here so my kid gets some activity. Just don't talk to me.
Talk to me. Yeah. Yeah. Like you don't always need that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So when writing your short story collection, I really felt like Texas was a huge part of it. So woven in, it was like atmospheric character, really.
Yeah.
And obviously, We Were the Universe also has some of that in there. And I was just wondering if you would talk about that a little bit, especially with your short story collection. I loved it so
Oh,
much.
thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I have I think that when I think back to my formative experiences, it's that place, and it's like the sort of both. I was born in Lubbock, Texas, like in the hospital in Lubbock, Texas, but like I spent a lot of time in Kittiquay, Texas, which is even smaller than Lubbock, if you can imagine. And then eventually ended up in like a suburb of Dallas. Like I sort of have had a lot of the Texas experience from like the very tiny town to like ultimately a suburb and then even the city a little bit in Dallas. But I think that those experiences, like Texas is huge, and that's the thing about it. It's like my experience is also very different than like my first boyfriend, who was like, a Taiwanese immigrant living in Houston. Very different Texas for him than my experience of Texas, right? Like there's a lot of different, it's so all encompassing, different languages, different geography, like it's wild. And there's a sort of storybook mythos to Texas in general. And it's home, it's just home. And also, some of I felt really claustrophobic and like I wanted to get out, but also beautiful, wide open spaces, time to think, beautiful, the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen in my life. There's something about when you are in a place where you have to find your people quickly, it's really rewarding because I don't know, it's like you're in New York City and you're like, well, everyone's cool or everyone's into different stuff. But when you're there, you're like, that's the girl, that girl. I can tell by the sticker on her backpack that she and I are going to be friends. And like that sort of feeling of just like a magnet to find your people quicker. But then, my whole family still lives there. They're all there. All my siblings, my parents, they're all there still. And so I do go back like to visit. I just don't live there anymore. But it's just, yeah, it's a huge part of who I am. And also the voices from that place, like some of the best storytellers I've ever heard were just people that I knew in these towns. It's not, I think you also think growing up in a small town, like when I get to New York, it's going to be, those are where the real people are. And then you're like, no, these are the real people.
Yes.
Plus it taught me a lot about meeting people where they are, which means also that like there can be 99 things that I can't talk about with my stepdad, for example, but I'll find the one that we can. And like I think it's actually really important. And also to know that because someone is very, very different than me, that doesn't mean that they don't still love me and that I don't still love them. It's just figuring out how to find that common ground, which I think is a really important lesson that some people don't have to have, because if you do grow up in a sort of bubble, you're just only seeing your own experience and expectations reflected back to you. It's a different thing than kind of going against the grain of stuff your whole goddamn life, Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this is kind of loops back to the psychedelics, but I don't want to forget to ask because it's something that I managed a dispensary for a while and then um ended that job and then had my son. And I'm curious, I know psychedelics are different, but
Sure.
with psychedelics and your kids, do you have any like idea of how you're going to approach that as a mom?
Well, I mean, I live in Portland, right? So everything is legal, everything is available all the time. This is actually something that's like hitting close to home at this exact moment. I have a 14-year-old who certainly there's access to everything. And I know that from my own personal experience, it's part of growing up, and I think it's a beneficial part of growing up to experiment with things. I would love it if my kids did not experiment with things until their frontal lobes are formed. But I'm not, a ridiculous person. I know what it is to be a teenager in the world. And so I know that that's part of it. I do feel, I'm also somebody, I can say as many nice things about my own experience with things, but I also have a family who was really wrecked in many ways by drug use because you just don't know how it's going to affect you personally. And so I live in constant sort of fear of like, how do I both talk realistically about this and explain it? And I think the way that I do it is the way that I do it in fiction, which is just to be really honest and to try to tell them this was my experience. I never want to hide things from them because I think that when they find out, they don't trust you, and then they feel that everything you've said is a lie. So I'm always like, just tell you my experience with this, and also tell you about somebody who wasn't as lucky as me and someone who had a bad experience, and you make your own decisions. But yeah, it's tricky. And I am a person who I'm not going to say I'll never do those things again. I might. I just don't know when you would have the time for it at this point where it's like, who has 12 hours to devote to, leaving this plane and going to the pink rug? I don't. But maybe when they're older, I don't know. But I am somebody who has now found, and actually, even when I think about my experiences with these drugs, it's like I'm a person who really likes my sober mind. It's actually my favorite. It's my favorite place to be is in my full-bodied sober mind. But I do know that there are plenty of things that are like very helpful for people and that they can use them to deal with things that it's a resource. It's a resource. And so I don't know. I don't know how you feel actually. I would be interested to know how you feel about that because like you knowing like this is a thing that people use that's actually a great resource and yet like I don't want my 14-year-old to be doing things that's going to damage his brain at this young age. I don't know. It's very scary to figure out how to walk the line. What about you? Like, will you be honest with your kids about this job and so forth?
Yeah, as much as I can. It's just so it's hard because how do you explain the balance without having experienced it?
Right.
Like, and I can't be like, here, try this, and then we'll talk about it. Like
Exactly.
I'm not, that is a little too far,
Sure.
but it just, yeah, I don't know. He'll be 3 in about a month, so I
Yeah.
have
You have time.
time, thankfully.
You have time to figure out a plan. But what I will say is something that I am just learning now is that I thought I would be worrying about some of these things at like 16. No, turns out around 13. And I don't know if it's
Yes,
just the state
that's
of the
right.
world. Yeah. And so I think it's sooner than you think. 3 is fine. You still have some time, but sooner than you think. And I do think that I also want to always be the person who's giving them the right information so that they're not hearing the wrong information, even if it's bad. Like if somebody's like, if you smoke weed, you're going to damage your brain and die, or you're going to jump off a building. Like I don't want them to have that either. Like that's also wrong. It's like wrong headed in the other direction. But I
Yeah.
feel like if you can be, I try to always be very matter of fact about things. And when they were little, because in Portland, they would be like, "What's the green hospital?" Like, there's all these green crosses. I'm like, okay, so
Yeah.
that's where they sell marijuana. What's that? It's a drug. Oh, like what? It's a drug. Like drugs are bad. I'm like, well, caffeine is a drug and alcohol is a drug and people do that and it's like part of our society. I don't know. I try to just always be like that, but then again, I have a history of addiction in my family. And so there's also that part of me that's like, is it the notorious gateway drug? It's like, I don't know. I actually think having things legal now is so much better because unlike me, when I was a teenager going to like Lloyd's house and like the creepy drug house where you had to buy your weed, who was also selling all kinds of horrible things at the same time, like weapons. I'm like, no, you can just go to a nice store and have an experience for you, and you know what you're buying. Like there's in so many ways it's so much safer.
Don't have to
Um,
worry about like fentanyl and very
exactly,
scary things like
which
that.
is a huge problem here in
Huge
Portland, like
problem
huge.
here too.
But
Yeah.
it's scary. It all is still very scary because I would love for my kids to have my exact experience
Yeah.
with these things, and I wish I could like make that for them. But also, when I was 16 doing San Pedro, would my parents have been okay with it? Probably not, like I doubt it. And so part of being a teenager is also lying and is hiding and keeping a part of yourself to yourself. So you just hope you like front load them. So from now until 13, you got 10 years to
Yeah.
really do all the like lay all the groundwork. And really, I think it's ultimately about like self-love and self-protection. If you have that core of like, I'm good and I need to protect myself because someone loves me, but more importantly, I love me and I don't want to damage myself, I think that goes really far. But yeah.
And honesty. Just like you
Yeah.
said, I really think that that was the biggest thing for me with my daughter is just honesty and
Yeah.
giving them the facts, like, because she is in her freshman year of college. So I'm like full blown
Wow.
anxieties, like worrying about
Yes.
all the real experiences. Truly, like, do you know what I mean? Like, of course,
Yes.
she's normal and wants to try
Yeah.
Molly and all the things, right? We all did and we did them. And it's like, I think you can kind of take the approach like the abstinence in sex in school approach, which is totally unrealistic. Like,
Yeah.
we're going to teach you not to do it instead of arming you with education on it. Or you can say, this is the real facts.
Yeah.
This is what I would like for you, but here's test strips for your drugs if you're going to use them.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be the mom who gets a phone call about
No.
that. I'd rather be the mom whose daughter says, wow, that was a crazy experience. Can I talk to you about it and live through it?
Absolutely. That's what I
Yeah.
say too.
Yeah.
It's like I want to be on the inside of it. I
Me too.
don't want to be on the outside of it
Yeah.
because And that also means like withholding judgment a lot too. And even for where you're just sort of like, interesting. And then what
Yes,
happened?
it's so
Um,
hard not to make a face, but you
it's so
can't. You can't
hard.
be reactionary. They'll tell you something, and you're like, okay.
I know, I know. That's an interesting choice. Okay. And then what happened? Yeah. And it, because also, as soon as you shut it down, it's the same thing with sex too. As soon
Yes.
as you shut it down, they're going to stop telling you anything. And then they're going to get in a situation at some point that they need your help with. I just, because I've been talking about this too a lot, like any stranger who will listen to me. But the lady giving me a facial yesterday, I was like, she said that you want them to make as many mistakes as possible while they live at home with you so that you can help them through those mistakes because when they're on their own it gets harder. But even I would say a freshman in college is still technical, she's still very
Oh
much
yeah,
at home.
we haven't gone a day without talking yet.
Yeah, so they're still under your care, but it's like make as many mistakes as you can while you're under my care so that I can help mitigate any damage and help you. And
Right.
then that way when they get older they have the tools because they'll still make mistakes because that's what life is.
We all
um,
do.
but it's also scary. I can just, I feel like I thought, oh, when they're teenagers, they'll be easier. It is absolutely the opposite. It's so much harder. I just feel so much more, the stakes are so much higher now.
I agree. Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, I didn't have you, you weren't in like, the right soccer class or something. It's like that. Now that seems so dumb compared to the stuff that I'm like, oh my God, your girlfriend is insane or whatever, for
Yes.
example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's way different. Like you said, the stakes do feel a lot higher.
a lot higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh, no pressure.
No pressure. Yeah. Yeah.
So, the fountain, switching,
Yes.
shifting here, super cool.
Oh,
That
sure.
you co-created with Chelsea. Be-
Yes.
I was curious about the origins and behind that. Would you talk a little bit about that? We're both very intrigued by it.
Sure. I mean, I think Chelsea and I figured out a long time ago, one of the things that we bonded over besides just being writers in Portland and having a ton in common actually, is that we both were using meditation to tap into that flow state and work. And so I would always just be scouring like YouTube and being like binaural beats, like whatever, and find something and listen to it while I was writing or find a sort of generalized meditation and write to it. Um, and then there's also this other piece of like figuring out that a lot of our students and clients that were coming to us with problems, it wasn't that they weren't really talented writers. It was that they were getting in their own way, like getting in their head too much and psyching themselves out and ultimately being like, no one cares what I think. I'm going to stop writing. And, just sort of all of the like self-trust things that they were struggling with. And so we started to talk about these things we were implementing on a smaller scale with our clients and students. And then we were like, what if we could like scale this in some way? And so we started the fountain, which is essentially the sort of like centerpiece are these guided visualizations for writers. They're specifically for writers to help you put up a buffer between the chaos and noise of your life, and you sort of listen to these 5-minute guided visualizations that help you get ready in the same way that like an athlete would listen to a meditation or visualization before they play. And so there's that part of it. There's a curriculum that goes along with it that's about figuring out where are your blocks, because a lot of them are stuff that came from when we were kids. It's not stuff that it's like a teacher said something mean to you at one point, or somebody, you gave someone a poem and they threw it away. Who knows? Like there's a lot of different things that shape us as artists and writers, and a lot of them are really similar. But so there's a curriculum, and then there's the meditation part, and then there's also a community, and in that community that's not, social media, which can feel so fraught to be on, where it's like everyone's sort of curating their life. But this is a place where people can go and sort of like bitch and complain and in a safe way, where you can say, I'm really disappointed. This didn't turn out how I wanted. Or also to share your wins, and it's not going to be this place of just, sometimes when you're feeling really bad about your work and you log online and you see someone just won some huge prize, you're like, now I feel worse. We're trying to get away from that stuff and just to make a community of people. They're mostly women. Like it's not only for women, but largely that's who we attract. And it's just people who are there to support each other. And then we also have, in addition to that, then there's like that's like a monthly thing. And then separate from that is an intensive, which is where we do like the really hardcore craft stuff. So like the consecution we were talking about, and also just basic stuff like dialogue and beginnings, endings, pacing, things like that, which are separate. But it's just this really beautiful platform that we've made, and it's come from our creative friendship, which is one of the true joys of my life is having writer friends that I can be really open and honest with, and that we are constantly reminding each other what we're trying to do.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious with the neuroscience and everything. I'm also
Yeah.
fascinated by it. I teach yoga and meditation and
Oh,
stuff.
awesome.
And I was curious, so do you think like chicken and egg type situation that you became interested in neuroscience from psychedelic usage, or did one come before the other? Like, had you already gotten into meditation before you ever tripped or anything?
No, because I was like
Young.
15. Yeah, no, I didn't know much. No, I
Yeah.
think I was just like, what I mean, also like, yeah, I won't even get into what it was like when I was growing up, where you're just like, well, I'll take that. What's that? Yum. Like the just the life of like, I'm like, how am I alive?
Same.
How did any of
Same.
us survive? Um, Also, I was very underparented in many ways and just had sort of free reign to do whatever I pleased. I was generally very good and had a pretty good guardrail, an internal guardrail, but like there was a lot of stuff. But no, I certainly had never meditated. I mean, again, like my family was sort of like yoga is satanic. Like
Yeah.
therapy is bad. I don't know. So I definitely did not have any schema for that going in.
Mhm.
I do think that I could almost feel my brain being rewired beautifully. Like I could feel, and I have these just gorgeous cinematic dreams, and I've always had those since I was little. Lucid dreams, but also just they're just gorgeous. They're just beautiful, and I felt like I was tapping into that same space. And um, I don't know what it is. It was like my religion. Like I never felt
Mhm.
that connection with my family in the same way that they did. Some of them did, but this was my. I was like, oh, this I get. This I understand. But then I think it definitely does do because Chelsea is not a person who Chelsea's been sober for 20 years, 21 years or something. Maybe that's not right. 20 years? I don't know, a long time, a very long time. And is not someone who I think would even necessarily think that drugs had a positive impact on her life at all.
Right.
Maybe, but that's not her thing. Her
Yeah.
thing, I think, is coming from the other side, which is like taking care of the mind, uh, conditioning the mind so you can get into that flow
Mhm.
state quickly. And also, she's definitely like a yoga person and a body movement person. And
Mhm.
I feel a lot like a brain in a jar most of the time and
Mhm.
have a hard time remembering that I have a physical body. Like Kit says in the book, but that's my sentiment as well. Like, unless I'm actually like physically engaged, I have a hard time remembering that I exist in reality. And so I feel much more comfortable in like brain space.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have those, like, to tap in and to realize that we're all just one animal, and the animal is going to write the book. And so you have to take care of all of those different pieces. Um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, but I love the thing about the meditations that I love is that so they're also set to solfeggio frequencies, which some people think are like maybe they don't do anything, maybe they do. But I made the music for these, and I have a binaural synthesizer, and it was like it has to be some frequency. So it might as well be a frequency that we know is
Mhm.
linked to
Yeah.
relaxation or creativity or whatever. So they're all at different frequencies that do different things for you. But then you can also just listen to the frequencies, which is mostly just to drown out my very loud children. But you can listen to a frequency while you're writing as well. And I just now have gotten into this place where it's like a 2 hour chunk of time, and it's like follows along with the audio track perfectly. And I just love it. So yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I hope there's more hybridized things in the future with neuroscience and
Yeah.
XYZ.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Awesome.
I am curious because this is such a singular book. The only thing I can think that's even kind of close is 200 Monas, which I just finished. It's coming out in March.
I haven't read
But
this. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
is there anything similar that you can think of? Because I want more.
Mhm.
I mean, I will say that the books that I love that I held them up as kind of like energetic models, but I don't have there's not a book doing like this precise thing, I don't think.
Mhm.
But when I think
No.
about sort of energetically, like these narrators that I really love, I love Renetta Adler's Speedboat, which is this like really thin, like just a mind that can't calm down. Like she's just sort of like this overeducated restlessness, and I love that. And I think I mean, I don't think, Kid is not overeducated at all. In fact, undereducated perhaps, but like I just wanted to get it doesn't have to be these like intellectuals in New York writing these stories. It's like they can also be, like I said, the best storytellers of my life have been people that, somebody else would look at them and be like, how do they have any business telling a story? But like, yeah, I don't know, energetically, I love Elizabeth Hardwick's Sleepless Nights, which is a nonfiction, but is again, like just, I think I want to tap into the mind of these beautiful, smart women. And that's what I'm coming back to sort of energetically. But no, somebody said it was like, Claire Vay Watkins, I love you, but I've chosen darkness. And I was like, no, it's not though, because that book is literally about a woman who, like, she truly leaves her child and goes. She's like the opposite. In fact, I think that Kit would be very mad about that comparison. Like, just in terms,
Yeah.
I love Watkins' work. I think especially Battleborn is gorgeous stories. But I was like, no, I think energetically that's like the opposite of what's happening. She doesn't leave.
Yeah.
She stays. It's harder to stay, perhaps, but yeah.
Well, thank you. That the Elizabeth Hardwick one I have not yet read, so I will be
Yeah,
doing that.
it's good. It's just a really beautiful voice. I mean, I'm like, she's not a mother. There's a lot of things that you won't find that are similar from this, but I just think like an energetic cousin, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We always love to hear book recs from our favorite authors.
Cool.
I mean, you're a reader and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's always fun to hear what other people read or recommend.
Yeah, for sure. I've been doing this new Substack and it's just looking at the opening paragraph of my favorite books. And it's like a super deep dive into the acoustics and sonics and the sounds of what's happening in the sentences. But
Yeah.
it's been so fun. It's called First Breath, but it's been so fun just to go back and to see. I was just doing Speedboat, the Adler book, and to be like, oh, often what happens is the whole genetic material for the rest of the book is present in that first paragraph. It's just a compressed version of what's going to happen in the book. And I love going back and seeing that. But I just got to reread Speedboat the other day and I was like, oh, it's so good. So
Oh,
good.
so fun. I love a good reread.
Yeah, same.
Well, thank you so much for letting us
Yeah.
chat with you today. That hour flew by.
I know. Thank you so much. And thank you for letting me talk about my kids.
Oh, yeah, I know. Hey, it
It
helps.
happens.
Yeah, it happens. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for thinking of me and good luck with this. And I really appreciate your careful questions and your reading.
Aw,
It
thank
means a
you.
lot.
Yeah,
Thank
same
you.
here. Thank you so much, Kimberly.
Have a great
Thank
rest
you.
of your day.
Too.
You
Bye.
Bye.
too. Bye.